With the aid of Shadow Garden, Cid Kagenou kept his distance as he observed Sherry, the Midgar Academy's resident archaeologist, and the one in charge of unveiling the secrets of the artifact that had been given to her by Iris. Of course, there were his misgivings as to whether or not this artifact was of any real value or consequence. But if it was so important that the 12 Knights of Round was having her look into it, then there had to be more to its secrets and capabilities. Of course, under normal circumstances, Kagenou would have chosen to have gotten involved himself, tried to get closer to the target. But he now had to pick his battles. He was currently in a relationship, and it wouldn't look right for him to be two-timing the princess of all people. Not that he was trying to, but he had to know when to step in and when to pull away. But from what he was able to gather, whatever this artifact was, it was incomplete. More so, it was a controller than anything else. There was another part to it that was missing, although what it was, he wasn't entirely sure. Grid, a member of the Justice League, had been informed about Sherry's whereabouts and as to what she was looking into. He had been scouring through the records, trying to find any mention of the artifact or what it was supposed to be paired with. After searching through catacombs upon catacombs of documents and other ancient texts, Grid would finally come across what he was looking for. It was the scheme chromatics for an artifact known as the Eye of Avarice. He would inform the League about what he had found. Of course, to their dismay, the idea that this cult of Diablos had something in connection to the Eye of Avarice was definitely alarming, considering that it was a Category 10 level artifact, something that was expressly forbidden for the public to even have access to. And how exactly did they come across this? Superman would ask through the call. It seems that it was found by Miss Iris Midgar of the 12 Knights of Round. They had no idea what the artifact was at the time, so they've had a resident archaeologist looking into it to try to uncover its mysteries. Is it the actual eye itself? No, it's just a master controller for the eye. They both have to go hand in hand. The eye is more valuable than the controller, but if the controller were to fall into the wrong hands, it needs to be recovered quickly. I want you to go to Midgar Academy, retrieve the controller, and keep it stored away until further notice. And I want you to consider monitoring the area. Iris would be informed by Grid that he was going to be making his way to Midgar Academy to retrieve the artifact. She saw no reason to oppose to this and was more than fine with handing it over to a higher authority. At the time, the only ones of the 12 Knights of Round who were on campus were Helena Wayne and Tara. Laura was out doing patrols, and as for Jessica, she had a scheduled meeting with Sinestro to go over a few things with her training with the Yellow Lantern Ring, so she was off campus at the time as well. It was at that moment in particular that a magical barrier would form around the school and the school grounds, making it impossible for anyone to escape or for anyone to get in. For Kagenou, he even felt his magic being afflicted with, and that could only mean one thing. The enemy was making their move. Just as he had expected, fake Shadow Garden had stepped onto the scene and were causing a mess, trying to damage his reputation, he supposed, but there had to be more to it than that. Without even thinking much about it, one of the fellow members of his class, the Princess Rose of Orania, would attempt to strike back against the would-be terrorist. Of course, for Kagenou, he saw this as a golden opportunity, a chance to make a daring escape without anyone suspecting the wiser. As such, he played up the role of the noble student trying to stand for what was right and would allow himself to be cut down, while everyone else was taken hostage, the students rounded up into the auditorium. He figured they'd leave his dead body in the classroom, and, making sure that the coast was clear, he would perform the reversal technique to allow himself to escape from near death. The secret technique, 10-minute death. Using magic to control the blood flow to his brain, it would allow for his heart to be active even if it stopped beating. Of course, it was a gamble, since he was actually on the verge of death, but by using the magic to artificially restart his heart, he was able to be back in the world of the living. Although his magic was definitely being toyed with, he could only use it in small and refined amounts, not to its fullest extent. But thankfully, he had his trusty sword with him, and he didn't get as far as he did training just to use magic. No, he made sure to keep all of his bases covered. He looked out to see that the organization in question were really covering their tracks, and he could see a gathering of knights on the outside, and he could even hear the thundering of the dome as Laura Kent was smashing into it, doing everything in her power to try to break it free. They're even bringing out the big guns. Cid could spot that Sinestro was here as well, along with a few other members of the Yellow Lantern Squad, and Jessica. They were combining their powers to try to break through the dome. He was probably paying a visit when all of this happened, and yet they still haven't sent any members of the League. Now that I think about it, how many members of the 12 Knights around were even on campus? There were 2, Helena Wayne and Tara. They wouldn't be any trouble, nothing to worry about. But that did lead him to have to think of his next course of action. If this barrier was being erected, then it must have been quite strong, if not even the power of the 12 Knights around could even break through it. Although all 12 of the knights weren't here, it wasn't common to have all 12 in the capital at any given time. They often patrolled and lived in other provinces, so chances are, outside of who was ever on standby, everyone else was off doing their own thing. Which for Kagenou was fine enough. He wasn't really looking to get into a fight with all 12 knights around. It'd be unnecessary bloodshed, to say the least. But still, there was the matter of Sherry. Perhaps the artifact that she had been working with, that's probably what the enemy was after. And sure enough, Kagenou was right. The gaunt knight in question, along with his fake shadow garden, had gathered and rounded up all of the students that they could find. Everyone was left as hostages inside of the auditorium, while the hunt for Sherry would begin. For Sherry, in the midst of the chaos and everything else, she was attempting to escape with the artifact in question. Of course, she didn't really know what else she could do with it, although she had a theory. It could possibly help in deciphering the barrier in question that was surrounding the school. That way they could get the much-needed help that could save them from this nightmare. As for Kagenou, he would continue to assess the situation along with the members of Shadow Garden as they planned out their next move. What exactly should my next move be? They're probably after Sherry, and if that's the case, then it could lead to the mystery behind the Eye of Avarice, and behind what that artifact is supposed to be. From what he had been able to learn, it was only one piece of the puzzle. But why go through all of this trouble? This all seemed too well organized. This wasn't just some copycat terrorist organization. This didn't feel like something the Cult of Diablos would do either. No, there was something else afoot. The key word, treachery. Of course, Sherry would move through the undergrounds of the academy. attempting to find her secret base in hopes of perfecting her craft. If she could fully decipher what the artifact was capable of doing and gaining control over it, then she had a chance of undoing the barrier. Kagenou would follow her from the shadows, assisting in taking out any of the terrorists that attempted to hunt her down. But of course, this was all just to draw out the real big bad behind the scenes. Because whoever it was, chances are they'd make themselves known soon enough. All he had to do was wait. And sure, as Sherry made it back to her room, where all of her tools were needed to finish the work that she had started, there was someone there waiting for her. Her father. Adoptive father, to say the least, but her father nonetheless. Of course, Sherry was surprised to see that her father was here. He was a former 12 Knights of Round member, a swordsman that had to retire due to illness. For Sherry, she was just glad to see that her father was here and that he was safe. She felt much more secure knowing that he was by her side. As she embraced him in a hug, she immediately found herself feeling sleepy, going into an unconscious state. So it was the father all along, Kagenou thought. Rather cliché to say the least, but not surprising. As Sherry fell to the wayside, he watched as Rosalind would pick up the artifact before combining it with another. Seeing that now was the time to make his move, Kagenou would change his uniform to that of black with the signature mask of the DeathStroke, his nint metal slime forming into a sword. He watched as Rosalind would start to set the room on fire, looking to burn all of the research that Sherry had done, making sure that no one else could decipher what he had. Was he a part of the cult of Diablos? Was this the work of the League somehow? No. The cult seemed to be more eccentric than anything else, not this calculated. And as for the League, they wouldn't have to go through all of this trouble just to get their hands on the artifact. If they really wanted it, they could have just taken it. No, this had the makings of a third party. All that was left to do was to confirm his suspicions. As he burst through the window, Rosalind turned to see that he was greeted by none other than DeathStroke, the Shadow. I should have known you would have come crawling around sooner or later. Do you like what I've done with your organization? I think I've made you all rather popular. I appreciate it. After all publicity is good publicity, isn't it? Maybe not in your case. Now your organization are considered as nothing more but enemies of the state. And I've gone the full length to make sure it happens. False testimony, false evidence. Shadow Garden will never be able to recover from this. You will be treated as hostiles by the entire world. You'll be blamed for everything that happens tonight. Every head that falls, all of that blood, it will all be upon you and you alone. Rosalind felt confident in his statement. After all, it was true. After tonight, if Shadow Garden were considered hostile before, they would be considered enemies to the state. Something that couldn't be ignored and something that would be given the full attention by the might of Midgar. But to his surprise, his words didn't move Kagenou at all. Quite the opposite. Okay, and? I'm sorry, did you not hear what I told you? It's over. What's over? What exactly is over here, Rosalind? Your reputation, everything. You will be considered enemies. Yeah, you've already said that. Now tell me, why exactly should I care? Now Rosalind was confused. Why was he not perturbed by this? I think you have a misconception about Shadow Garden, my friend. But in your old age, you've probably become senile, so I'll forgive your ignorance. Allow me to enlighten you about something. We're not heroes. We never have been and we never will be. But it doesn't mean that we are evil either. You don't understand anything about Shadow Garden, and because of that, it will lead to your demise. Shadow Garden is nothing more but a shadow. We live in the shadows to hunt the shadows. Justice is neither black or white. It is but a hue of gray. Justice is truth, and Shadow Garden exposes the truth. It doesn't matter what label you choose to call us. It doesn't change the work that will be done. All truth will be exposed in due time. And as far as being enemies of the state, I welcome it. I hate the state. I hate the order and the status quo. You think I'm scared of the League being my enemies? No. The League has always been my enemy, and it always will be. You talk as if you plan to defeat the Justice League. Oh, it's not just a plan. It will be a reality. You are truly insane. But allow me to give you some clarity about your reality. Rosalind took hold of the Master Controller and the Eye of Avarice, combining them both into one as he amplified his own strength with it. Your reality is that you will be cut down here and now by Rosalind the Gaunt Knight, master and warrior of the land of Midgar. With your defeat, it will be the stepping stone to gaining back my career. Your career? Oh yes, you were once a respected swordsman in the land of Midgar, a former 12 Knights of Round. And yet, you lost your position to those damned heroes. The 12 Knights of Round used to stand for something. We served loyally to the king. But after the war, after I was stricken with this illness, one by one we were replaced by those costumed bastards. They've made a mockery of the 12 Knights of Round. But no more. I will regain my place, and I will defeat them all. So, petty vendetta. And what exactly does Sherry play into all of this? Her mother was a researcher just like her. She studied the Eye of Avarice. She was so close to deciphering the artifact, but then she got cold feet, scared of what its true powers were capable of, and she wanted to stop, to turn it over to that damned... She pissed me off. After all the hard work it took for me to find it, draining all of my family's resources just to gain hold of it, she was prepared to turn it over to the regime. I killed her. I disemboweled her. I tore her limb from limb, and then I drove my sword through her beating heart. And Sherry was none the wiser. Of course, all of my efforts were in vain. But I had support. There was at least one who was willing to help me. And because of that, I had renewed vigor in my soul. A chance to gain what was lost. Renewed vigor? Someone backing you? And who might this someone be? Now why would I tell you such useless information? After all, you will soon be in the grave, and dead men tell no tales. Using the power of the Eye of Avarice, Rosalind would engage in combat against Kagenou. Of course, with the use of the Eye of Avarice, he had to refine the usage and the output of his magic to be so thin-lined that the magic could hardly be registered or absorbed. And yet his focus and precision, that great exorcist of power, it was more than capable of holding its own against Rosalind. If this battle were the definition of anything, it was death by 1,000 cuts. Each blow that Kagenou struck, it had to be precise, its movements true. He couldn't waste any motion or any usage of his magic. And before Rosalind even realized, he had been defeated. He severed his ligaments, cutting through the nerves in his arms and legs, until eventually he couldn't move. He couldn't even raise his sword, as Kagenou held him in the air, his sword pressed against his chest. You went on and on, that you never even realized your defeat was happening right before your very eyes. Now what was it you said? You disemboweled her? You cut her limb from limb? And then you drove your blade right through her heart. You know, where I come from, we believe in the concept of karma, that for every action there is an equal or greater reaction. And do you want to know what I see from you? All I see is a pathetic man, a once respected swordsman who turned against everything he stood for. From what I've been told, the 12 Knights of Round were supposed to be the law keepers, the ones who established the order and kept the peace. You gave into your evil and your hubris, all for some vain title that truly doesn't even matter. You want to be a part of the 12 Knights of Round so bad. You want to be a part of a system that no longer needs you. And for that, your crimes will be paid in full. But before then, there's only one thing that I request. I want to know, who were you working for? For Rosalind, what else could he do? His death was imminent. And yet, no. Was he being used this whole time? Did they know that this was going to happen? Of course, from Cid Kagenou's periphery, as he looked past him out the window, he saw her. He saw where she was aiming. So that was their play. They were only going to use him to gain hold of the artifact. Well, no. Not on his watch. You'd be better off destroying it. It will just end up in his hands. Whose? The one that sent me. He is a member of the League. He is... At that moment, the crossbow fired, with the arrow piercing right through Rosalind's skull, killing him instantly. Kagenou would drop the body as he looked out the window to see who had fired the shot, but they were already gone. But as he looked down, seeing and observing the arrow itself, he pulled it from out of the skull of Rosalind and stored it away for safekeeping. This was the clue that he would need. Whoever had hired Rosalind to attack and steal the Eye of Avarice controller. There was even more at work than he had originally thought. But for now, his main objective was to destroy the artifact. And in one fell swoop he did, overloading it with his own magical supply and destroying it instantaneously. Of course, as Sherry would awaken, she saw only the dead body of her father, and standing over his corpse, the DeathStroke. Kagenou watched as Sherry would cling to the body of her deceased father, never being none the wiser to the fact that all of her pain originated from him. Of course, he probably could have told her the truth, but in the end, what good would it do? She probably wouldn't even believe him anyway. And besides, it was just like he said. It didn't matter what anyone thought of him, whether they liked him, hated him, judged him. He didn't live for anyone's approval but his own, and his own justifications for the actions that he took. Once the barrier was down, all of the cavalry would come charging in instantly. The real Shadow Garden had defeated the fakes, and they had all disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared to begin with. The school had been almost entirely obliterated, and for Iris, along with the other members of the 12 Knights of Round, all of them standing in unison, the four, they knew one thing was for certain. Whoever this Shadow Garden was, they were dangerous, and they could not be ignored any longer. An emergency meeting was called soon after. It was mandatory. All Knights of Round were to be present. They were going to have a formal call with the League. The campaign to the south was wrapping up. And of course, for the League itself, they thought that now was the time for celebration and relaxation. So you could imagine their dismay when they were forced into an emergency call. Whatever the situation was, they thought that the Knights of Round could handle it. But it seemed so urgent of a matter that it couldn't be ignored. Superman would take his seat at the hall, as the other League members sat to his left and to his right, as the screen would show high above them, showing the conference room of the 12 Knights of Round, Iris addressing the proceedings. Yes, Iris, what is the meaning for this emergency call? Superman would ask her. Lord Superman, thank you, as well as you, members of the League, for taking the time to come to this emergency meeting, but we believe that the situation was too dire to be put on hold. And what exactly is the situation? Diana would ask her. We want to bring to your attention a group. We believe that there is an organization forming within the country of Midgar, one that threatens the stability and the peace of our nation and the world. These are high claims, King Arthur would say. Are you sure? I am. And what is this organization? Eobard asked. Who's this big, bad group that we have to face now? They call themselves Shadow Garden. Shadow Garden? Superman would say. Yes, they call themselves Shadow Garden. They claim to live in the shadows to hunt the shadows. But there's more to it than that. The leader of this organization, a man that calls himself DeathStroke, the Eminence in Shadow. On multiple occasions, he has made the goals of this organization very clear. And what exactly are their goals? Owlman would ask her. In no uncertain terms, sir, their goals are to kill the Justice League. This concludes The Eminence and Shadow, No More Heroes. What if Cid Kagenou was DeathStroke? Season 1, Part 6. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow as we continue with The Eminence and Shadow, No More Heroes. What if Cid Kagenou was DeathStroke? Season 1, Part 7. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.